And I remember telling Mom and Dad, I'm never going back to that church again.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of ended my connection to organized religion. After that, I kept seeing all of this quote unquote organized religion that looked more like cults and authoritarianism, when it came to certain do's and don'ts and mandates. And I just took the 10 Commandments
Mm-hmm.
with me,
Mm-hmm.
do unto others. Every religion that I've ever looked at or studied, whether it was Jewish or Islam or Hindu or Buddhist,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of it has to do with do unto others
Mm-hmm.
as you'd have them do unto you, and love.
Yeah.
Love is God.
Hey, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 112 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. Well, today I have a wonderful guest. I have a friend. Her name is Cindy Forrest, and Cindy is a retired physical therapist. And she is someone that I have known for about 10 or 12 years. I needed some part time work around when we first met, and I was working with her a little bit. And she was doing physical therapy for seniors. And it's so wonderful and interesting to talk to Cindy because she is not particularly quote unquote spiritual. She's definitely not religious. She describes herself in a certain way, and she's an all around good person who recognizes grace in her life. And I love talking to her and just the presence that she brings as a human being and as a person. And she's not an atheist, but I mention that word because I believe that there are people who uh, don't call God God. I know some people who will call God nature or will call God the universe. There are people who don't believe in God at all, and yet I've seen them walk through this world in a place of being loving and giving and honoring their fellow man. And that's just what I feel like this life is about. A part of this podcast for me, a part of this journey and message that I would like to get across is that I feel, especially now, that it's so important that we um, look at ourselves. I mean, I'll speak for me. It's been important for me in most of my adult life to look at myself and try to be the best person that I can be. And that has been a process. I mean, I've had the best intentions in the world, but it's a process because uh, I grow and grow and grow through the grace of God. So I'm not quite the same person now in terms of my awareness and my self awareness as I was 20 or 30 years ago. But the thing is, I've noticed that something that can really bring um, tears to my eyes, and it's not going to happen in this moment, is I think about sometimes when we do pass away in that moment. And I don't believe in a judgment day. I don't believe that for me, when we do pass, that we engage and encounter an angel or God says, who has us reflect back on our lives, and we're judged on our life, and we may or may not get into or get through the gates of heaven. I don't look at things in that way, but I do believe that, and we know from people who have had near death experiences, that we certainly have an opportunity when we pass to reflect on our whole life in a span of, who knows, maybe seconds, maybe maybe longer, but we have an opportunity to do that. But I believe that when we pass that, we get back to what is really true, and which is that God is love and we are love and as children of God. But no buts really, but what I'm trying to get to is I imagine instead of that judgment, quote unquote, when I think about what my experience might be, I just imagine God saying to me or somebody on behalf of God saying to me, well done. That's my hope, that I will be told, well done for my time on earth in this form as a human being. And I feel some emotion around that because, as I said, it's my hope. But, part of me is like, well, will it be? Or, this life is so hard and we go through so many ups and downs and we make choices that we might second guess later on. And it's just a lot, as we all know. And hearing something that equates to well done is an emotional feeling because it would be so gratifying beyond words. And I'm bringing this all up because it comes up for me with Cindy. She's not, as I said, spiritual. We don't believe in the same exact things. As that's true for many of my guests. But she is such a good, wonderful human being. She's such a wonderful human being that there's no question for me that that well done that I think I might or hope to hear or receive for myself, that is 1,000% true for her. So she is someone, to tell you a little bit about her. She was married for a very short period of time, which she'll mention a little bit at one point in her life. She's in her 70s and she's been single, for many years, although she's had relationships, which she'll touch on a little bit. But I bring that up because she is a woman who has just been living her life on her own terms. Her entire life on her own terms. And it's just wonderful. And she's just wonderful to know. So let's get started. Let's meet her and let's start healing. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Adrienne. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I just really never thought that you would be on my podcast because I didn't think you would be agreeable to it. And then about a week ago, I was over and we were chit-chatting, and you've told me about you and your life many times, but I just felt like I really should have you on the podcast. And
thank you. I feel honored.
I'm honored that you said yes with no hesitation.
Oh, okay. You're my friend.
Yes.
If you want me to do it, I'll try to do it.
You know what I like to ask people? And I did not ask Jackie, who's sitting right here when we recorded yesterday, but I like to ask people how you feel in your skin. Like, how do you feel today, just in your essence, on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, I feel great. Just having you and Jackie over here and enjoying a nice lunch and talking, and her being so interested in, sharing my home and all of that.
Yeah,
it's been great. And the artwork is great.
Yeah, you have.
And when I'm involved with people, then it takes me out of myself. And, you're not so self-conscious. You're not thinking about yourself. You're just enjoying the conversation.
Yeah.
And I've been feeling that way today, and it's great.
It's been a beautiful time, and you have a wonderful home. Jackie said it's like a museum. I think of it like a gallery.
Yeah.
How would you describe it? You have so much artwork.
Well, I thought about that. I think this structure with all of these things that I have accumulated and collected and displayed over the last 25 years that I've been in this home.
Which are paintings.
Yeah, paintings. And they all have a history. They all are either gifted to me or I have found them as a treasure, like at an estate sale. But they all have meaning to me. And almost everything has some kind of representation as far as my life goes. And I think I was telling you or Jackie earlier that I don't really know what the latest trends are in decoration and all of that in terms of interior decorating.
Right.
But my decorating just comes from my own creative spirit and my love for certain memories that I like to display. Like that china cabinet has, it has my mother's china, it has my grandmother's china. It's not that I use it that often, but I remember eating off of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everything has
nostalgia.
Has a story.
Wow. So when did you start getting into artwork? Was it just you saw paintings and then when did you become a collector?
Let's see. When I was a young girl, my mom and dad tried to give me every opportunity to develop whatever talents I may have. I went to dancing class. I took piano lessons. I took art lessons, hoping to find my thing if I had such a thing. I remember in college taking an art appreciation class, and that was all the old classics, from Picasso and Monet back and forward. And I've just always appreciated art.
And you've been drawn to black art.
Yeah, because I enjoy folk art a lot. And I kind of think of that in the realm of folk art because I appreciate the representation of the culture. And I enjoy experiencing different cultures. That's why I'm so lucky and so glad that I did so much traveling when I was young. I went all over Europe, I went to South Asia, and I've been in South America, and I've just enjoyed being in the culture, not just as a tourist, but as a participant. And a lot of things are memories and collections from those trips.
Right. Before we started recording, you just said, as far as God, you said, well, I'm an agnostic. What does agnostic mean?
Well, to me, agnostic means living in the question, not disbelieving and not believing, but just always living in the question of what is this entity that most people in the world have some kind of relationship with or dedication to, something that they call God. It may be another name for it. And I appreciate that. I think that guides people through a more moral life if they have a role model like God. But I can't say that I've ever had a personal experience of God. I'm glad if there is a God or more than one God, I'm glad for it because I think it keeps people. I wonder what people would be like if they didn't have a moral compass. I mean, it's bad enough right now, some of the things that happen in this world, in this country. But if there wasn't some believing of a higher source of good.
Did you grow up with any religion in your family?
I grew up in a religious family. We went to church every Sunday. It was a Methodist church in South Carolina, medium size. And I was the president of the youth group. And, I sat through the sermons and I sang the songs and I knew the psalms and the songs.
Yeah.
But then once I left to go to college, I had no desire to seek out a Methodist church to go to. Occasionally I would go if somebody was getting married or something like that. But I remember coming back on a holiday during college, and it was at Christmas time, and I remember going to church with Mom and Dad, and I thought we were going to hear Christmas music because, I love the Christmas
Yeah.
songs and
Yeah.
everything. And it's like muscle memory. Your mind knows all those carols and
Yeah.
songs. So I was looking forward to that. And the minister that came up to the podium, nobody I knew. I mean, I always liked the ministers we had. They were more pastoral. But this guy was more hell and brimstone. And that shocked me, especially on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's talking about homosexuals and how they're going to go to hell. And I thought, what in the world? And I looked at my mom and my dad, and my mother was just trying to calm me down because she knew that this was just really upsetting me.
And that was in the
70s, early 70s.
Yeah. I know you, and I know you live your life a certain way. You're a wonderful person. You're a thoughtful person. Do you ever, in your quiet time, or even doesn't even have to be a quiet time, do you ever experience a spirit or a connection that you feel is greater than humanity with somebody else? Or just with yourself, or with Kiko, your dog? Are you tearing up?
A little bit.
Why?
Little bit.
What's making you tear up?
I don't know.
Oh, you're so sweet. What are you thinking about, Cindy?
I was just thinking about the memory of that preacher and how awful he was. And I kept thinking about my friend Curtis. This was my friend that I grew up with through school. He was like an adopted boy in our family because his mother was very estranged. His father died. But anyway, when this preacher started talking about homosexuals, I mean, he was talking about Curtis.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just had to get out of that church. And I remember telling Mom and Dad, I'm never going back to that church again. And that kind of ended my connection to organized religion. After that, I kept seeing all of this quote-unquote organized religion that looked more like cults and authoritarianism, when it came to certain do's and don'ts and mandates. And I just took the 10 Commandments with me, do unto others. Every religion that I've ever looked at or studied, whether it was Jewish or Islam or Hindu or Buddhist, I mean, all of it has to do with do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and love. Yeah. Love is God. That's what God is to me.
God is love. Yeah. I feel like the truth of every religious faith, the real truth under every religious faith is the same, which is God is love.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's all kind of mythologies on top of that. There's the mythology of Jesus being born in the manger and him being crucified and coming back and saving us. And then every single religion has a mythology about that, about God. And whatever it is, that's fine. But it's when people refuse to let go of some of the things, for example, that are in the Bible that don't really apply to modern life.
Yeah.
And they use that as a weapon against other people. Like this thing about the Bible says that homosexuals are going to go to hell. I don't know what else the Bible says about stuff like that, but there's a lot of that people grab onto when they want to take their anger and use it against other people. Yeah. They want to quote, well, the Bible says.
Right.
So I think that's a lot of what I try to guard myself from.
Even before this podcast, before the podcast, since the podcast, I've had many friends, black and white, and every culture, all ages, who say similar things, similar to what you were saying, yesterday, that they grew up a certain way, in a tight religious structure that didn't really serve them. And so then they either found something else that served them, like another faith that served them, or maybe like what you just described has been your experience.
Yeah. I mean, I did study some religion. I did go to I went to some of the Unitarian type churches once in a blue moon, but none of it ever really compelled me.
Do you ever or have you ever prayed where it's just like one-on-one with you and a higher spirit?
I don't know whether I would call it prayer because I don't say, "Dear God." The only time I ever pray is when we're sitting down with people who want to say grace for supper or for lunch or for dinner. And then I always add on that phrase that my dad said, "And be with those that need thy help the most." That's the way he always ended the blessing. And, all of those good things.
Mm-hmm. Something is really touching you. Something's touching you,
I don't know.
Cindy.
I don't know. I think about my mom and dad and how lucky I am to have had them. And they were both very religious, my mama particularly. And sometimes I feel ashamed, I think, because I feel like, I may have disappointed them in my lack of faith.
I don't know how anybody could be disappointed in the love that you have in your heart.
I used to say to Mother, this was when she had ALS. I used to say to her, I would tease her, and I'd say, "Mother, do you think I'm going to hell because I'm a heathen?" And she would get this little smirk on her face, and she'd go, but, we laughed. And it was like a joke.
Mm-hmm.
But I think after that episode at the church, my dad knew that I was never coming back to that church. My parents were not real demanding.
Yeah.
They empowered us to do what we wanted to do and learn what we wanted to learn, as long as our heart was good. And, they were both really good people.
I feel like pastors, ministers, they have so much power on Sunday morning. You have a captured audience across the world. And if you can convey love and have people walking out, going on to their life and their week in a loving place, that could be so wonderful. But that's not what always happens.
Yeah. I went to church a couple of years ago on a little bit of a regular basis with a guy that I was dating that was Hispanic, very strict Catholic upbringing, carried a lot of guilt with him about all kind of stuff. And he really wanted me to go to the church with him for the service. And I did. And I sat there and I didn't feel uncomfortable. I enjoyed the music. I enjoyed the atmosphere and choir and the minister.
Yeah.
No, what they call him, minister?
Priest.
He gave a message.
Right.
And it wasn't a hell and brimstone kind of message. It was a very encouraging type of thing. And I like that. And then there were these rituals that they went throughout the service that I didn't really understand. Mm-hmm. But it was just an adventure. It was just like being in Vietnam and going into the temple with my friend Mai and them lighting the incense and chanting and doing their thing. And I just really enjoyed it because it was educational, it was peaceful, it was loving. And
I grew up Catholic, and what I do love about the Catholic Church, I'm not engaged with the Catholic Church now, but what I do love are the prayers, which I think the prayers have changed in the last few years. The prayers would bring me close to God. And it was one prayer, "Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us." And you just repeat that, "Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us." And then the last one is, "Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, grant us peace." And I don't know what it is about that prayer, but I would always start crying.
Really?
It was right before communion, and I would because I felt like it was me just like giving my heart and my problems and everything to God, to Jesus, for me.
Yeah.
I don't need everybody to believe in Jesus, but I was in complete surrender. I think that's what that prayer would do for me. Mm-hmm. And so I was like in surrender and comfort at the same time, and it would just make me cry every single time.
Yeah, I've had episodes like that.
Yeah.
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 Whether it's at a play or a concert or at a church or whatever, something just touches you and
Yeah.
makes you feel lifted.
Well, what I like to ask people is there a time, this is a really interesting question for you. Oh, Cindy, I love you so much. I wasn't
She
expecting.
loves sitting here watching me cry.
I did not expect this. I did not expect this.
I need a Kleenex. Anyway, what?
Is there a time in your life when you experienced a miracle, which you would call a miracle, and it was beyond your doing? You were like, this happened and it was beyond my control. I had nothing to do with this taking place. It's a miracle and I had nothing to do with it.
Oh, I think that's probably happened. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have cataloged it that way.
What words would you put to it?
It's just like the feeling you get when you're thinking about one person intensely and then the phone rings and it's them. And it could be somebody you haven't talked to for months and they may live in England and all of a sudden you're thinking about them and they're calling you.
Yeah.
And you think, oh my God, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I really mean that as a miracle, but it feels that way.
Yeah. What about in your journey in life, in your career, or were you ever in any kind of situation that you got out of it, but it wasn't your doing?
Yeah. As a young adult, I was a pretty wild child. I always found myself in sometimes precarious situations where I think, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? And you do, and you think, oh, well, that's a miracle. I got out of that. Because I never, with all the risk that I have taken, I have never had to suffer because of it. I've never had to pay a penalty or been punished.
Yeah.
I've always gotten away with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of a miracle.
Mm-hmm. There's been a grace, sounds like, with you.
Yeah. And I figure, well, do unto others. If you just keep serving, I've said this before, I think I was just born to serve. And that's been my modus operandi in
I mean, world. That's very, this is me talking because I don't want to project, but to me, that's very holy. That's a very holy place to be. That's how I try to live my life. I feel like that's the highest thing that we can do for somebody else is to be of service.
Right.
And
I mean, I don't know if that's a religious thing or a Christian thing or a moral thing or a Cindy thing.
Well, I mean, and your profession was of service. You're a physical therapist.
Oh, and that really was kind of a miracle. I grew up in the Girl Scouts, and the Girl Scouts were pretty big in the South. And I went through the Brownies and the Girl Scouts and the Senior Scouts, and you have to put in a certain amount of service and education to get your bars. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we were working on was the handicapped bar. And we went to a camp called Camp Mary Elizabeth. And a friend of mine's aunt, or grandmother or somebody, is the one that endowed this park. When we went there was a whole group of children there. And they were handicapped or disabled or special needs in different ways. Some of them physically, some of them mentally. And I remember going into the lodge and there was a mat on the floor and a woman that I knew named Phyllis Petty, who happened to be in my mom and dad's Sunday school class. Mm-hmm. And all of the people in their Sunday school class, the children we were all like a big family. We got to know them over the years. We all grew up together. And I said, Miss Phyllis, what are you doing down there on the floor? She said, well, I'm helping this little boy because he's going to learn how to walk. And I said, wow, what is that? And she says, this is what we call physical therapy. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. I was 7th grade. And I never varied from that. Not 1 second. I not 1 second thought about being a nurse, being a teacher, being a construction worker, nothing.
Yeah.
I was going to be a physical therapist, and I went straight through, and I didn't miss a beat. I didn't take any classes that weren't relevant to that.
Yeah.
I went all the way through school, and, I never questioned it.
Right.
And I think that is something that most people don't have the luxury of knowing that young in your life. Who you're going to be, what you're going to be, how you're going to be.
Do you know why that resonated for you?
No, not really. About at that age, I had started babysitting. They paid you 50 cents an hour back then to babysit.
I remember.
And there were always kids in the neighborhood. Anyway, and I kind of like kids, but I sure did learn about kids, and I didn't really have any big desire to have them, but I kind of liked them. I liked to play with them. And something about playing with these little kids on the mat and helping them learn how to walk, that just resonated with me, I think.
Yeah. Throughout your career, do you remember what was so fulfilling about your work in doing physical therapy with your patients?
I think that somewhere along the way, my desire to work with children completely did a 180, and I turned to working geriatrics, working with older people. And I love that so much because you worked with so many people who were wise. They shared wonderful stories. They appreciated you for what you were helping them do.
Yeah.
Some of them, most of them. But once I started working with older people, I never gravitated from that. I wasn't interested in sports medicine. I wasn't interested in any other field of physical therapy except that. And I'm so glad I did because I went on and got a graduate degree in gerontology. So that helped me even know them and work with them and understand yourself.
Right.
When you've studied gerontology, you kind of recognize in yourself that process of aging, and you don't have to beat yourself up anymore.
Because it's a natural part of being a human. And
it's not the most important thing about you anymore. How you look, how you run, how you dance. It's not all. I always like this quote of mine that I say to people is, if it's physical, it's therapy. Meaning doing and running and dancing and moving and cooking and anything that's physical, hugging and kissing. Yeah. Anything that's physical is therapy.
Right.
How would people live if they were totally isolated without any human touch?
Right. Yeah, it's always something to me about how if you're like in a hospital bed or in the bed too long, like how bed sores can come about just like what can happen to your body just by laying down.
Just think what happens to your mind and your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
it's devastating. And in our society, older people have not been valued.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's just so sad to see that deterioration.
You did marry. I always want to say you never married.
It was very short marriage.
Yeah.
Very abusive.
Right.
Yeah.
And were you in your 20s?
Yeah. It was it was about a couple years out of college. So let's see. I was about 23, 24.
And most of your adult life, you lived in L.A. Well, not L.A., San Francisco, right?
No, it was in the Southern California area, Los Angeles area. Yeah.
Okay. Did you live in San Fran at all?
No.
No? Okay.
No. Okay. I had friends there and I visited there a lot, but I never lived there.
So you were there how many years before you came to Atlanta?
28.
28.
I guess since I was in my early 20s when I went there,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't come back until I was 50 to here, something like that, I had the experience of really coming into my own as an adult. I think between 20 and 50,
Yeah.
that's when everything develops and kind of comes together. And that happened to me in California.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always felt a little schizophrenic because I am Southern. I am very Southern in my roots.
Right.
But my development
Was
as an
in
adult.
LA.
So my tradition is in the Southern culture. My development as an adult
Yeah.
is in the Southern California culture. And now here I am again.
Back in the South.
Back in the South.
Yeah.
And I feel comfortable here, but at first I didn't.
Are you willing to share about your 15-year relationship? That was very significant.
Oh, sure. The man was Jack.
Yeah.
He was the financial CPA for this company that I was working with. And we worked together all the time, and we lunched together, and eventually we started spending more time together. And even after that company, did they go bankrupt or something? They went out of business. We remained.
This was in California?
Yeah.
Share a little about what you were saying earlier about like his parents. Did you say he was born in an internment
Japanese
camp?
American, and he was third generation. And his parents were during World War II when the American parents were taken out of their living situation. They were Nisei, so they were second generation. They were born here. They were taken out of their home, and they were taken to an internment camp in Central California. And Jack was born there. His parents had him when he was there. So he was part of that. He never talked much about it. I think it was kind of like the whole Holocaust thing. When people have gone through something so horrific, it's not like they want to talk about it and relive it. So he couldn't say much about it because he was so young, and his parents never talked about it.
And so can you share a little bit about the relationship that you had? I mean, he was pretty major in your life.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It was pretty, it was definitely romantic. It wasn't, I'm sorry, I can't think of the words I want to say. We were friends first.
Yeah.
And that developed into a closer and closer relationship over the years.
Yeah.
Where we just enjoyed each other. And it's not that I didn't occasionally date other people, but I never found anybody that I wanted to be with more than him. Mm-hmm. And because of his extended family, he had all kinds of children and sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers. And his parents lived to almost in their 90s each. That he was never going to leave that culture. And he definitely wasn't going to leave it and come to Atlanta. And I felt like I needed to come to Atlanta to be closer to my mother after my father died. And I thought, Mom and I will grow old together.
Right.
That's when I bought this house. And I teased her and I said, see, Mother, you can just roll your wheelchair right on through the front door. She said, just don't put me in the basement, honey. Which was funny.
You and I
she wasn't even sick at that time, You
and I were talking last week about just not being married and how I think that I'm not married. I've never been married. Not that I don't have a desire to get married. I do. But I may never get married.
Yeah, I never will again.
Yeah, and I just think that can make some people uncomfortable, Yeah. And what do you think about, like, how do you feel? Like, you don't ever want to get married again, I don't think. And how do you feel about...
I don't think it's even possible.
Why? What do you think about that?
I mean, most white men my age, I always find myself... in competition with them. I mean, they see me as a competitive spirit.
I've said that so many times.
Yeah.
It's funny to hear you say that.
Yeah.
About men in my life.
Yeah. And I tend to like men of other ethnic groups. I've dated and had relationships with black men, Hispanic men, Asian men, and they've always been a lot more comfortable than any white men I've ever had relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just never met anybody and been involved with anybody that when I ask myself the question, would I like to have a child with them? And the answer is no. Then why would I ever want to marry them?
Right.
Even if I didn't want to have children, why would I want to marry them if they weren't good enough for me to have children with? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I miss having a handyman around all the time or somebody on your arm to go, it puts you in a different kind of societal group.
Yeah.
When you don't have a partner.
Yes. Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah. I have a friendship that it's coming back around, but it's definitely shifted. No, I don't mean she's getting excited like there's a man.
Oh.
No. No, I'm just saying that I have some friends and our relationship has shifted over the years because, they have friends that they hang out with who are couples. And so I'm not like a part of that.
Right.
So our friendship became more distant. It's becoming more closer now. But a year ago, I was crying over it. Just feel left out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of my friends are so dispersed. I mean, you're one of the close friends I have, the few close friends I have in Atlanta, because many of my friends have gone. I had relatives here. I had 2 cousins here, and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, the older you get, the harder it is to really make lasting friends because it's so hard to catch up. I mean, how do you catch up on your whole life?
Yeah.
With new people?
Yeah.
Unless there's really an attraction.
Well, they meet you where you are.
Yeah,
like we meet
that's
each
right.
other, me and
That's
Jackie,
right.
we meet each other where we are.
That's right. That's right. And you don't have to know everything about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Wow. Does your family think that you're different? My family thinks I'm different.
Yeah. My sister's children call me quirky. Quirky. What's quirky? I don't
You're
know.
the quirky aunt.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
the quirky aunt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have some resentment about that. I mean, my nieces, I have 1 niece and 1 nephew, and they each have 2 children. And since I've been here, all of those children have been born. Do you call it great niece and nephew?
Yeah,
Okay.
like grand.
Yeah, I have the great grand or whatever they are. I have, 1 niece, 1 nephew.
And they've had
each have
kids.
A girl and a boy. And they have never been to this house in 25 years.
Yeah.
And they only live 2.5 hours away. Now, there's something wrong with that picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I haven't opened up my house to them and open invitation for them to come. Mm-hmm. But they always have other things to do with their friends, or they even come to Atlanta for ball games or for when one of the kids has a competition going on. And I never know they're here. They never call. They never come by. Mm-hmm. It's like, you're just out there. Mm-hmm. They don't really make an effort. Mm-hmm. And I doubt it's like that with all American families, but I'm sure
I think it's not uncommon. I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I've said that my family's close, but then at the same time, I feel like I have nieces and nephews that I'm closer to than others.
Right.
And I kind of convey the same sentiment to one of my nephews that I'm really close with.
Yeah.
And I think that,
I met him, I think.
No, you met Justin.
Oh.
You met Justin. I'm
Okay.
talking about my other one.
Oh, okay.
But Justin is kind of a soulmate, but we don't see each other like in last couple of years. We haven't seen each other like as often. Uh-huh. And his life is like really like active. Sometimes I think we just miss out until, somebody's gone, the loved one's gone. But then I get back to this saying I was talking about to you, like in the Bible, that has just been on my heart for the last several months, of everything is vanity under the sun. Like like you miss out on life, but then we all go. And I feel like my perception of life after we're gone is we're in another form, we're in a spirit form, and we have a lot of perspective. And does it really matter? Everything is love. We get back to love when we leave this form. And it's sad while we're here. It's unfortunate while we're here when we don't get the things that we want, or people don't see us in the way that we want them to see us, or spend time with us the way we want them to spend time with us.
Yeah.
And they miss out.
Yeah, but I don't put much stake in that, I mean, they live in such a small world. I mean, they are never, they've never traveled internationally except for Ken, who did it for business, I mean, they've missed out on a lot because they're so into the kids playing ball and being a cheerleader and going to the ball games and this and going to the beach and having cookouts, and everything's the same. Year after year after year, it's the same tradition. They hardly ever bring new people in, maybe a few. They never go other places and enjoy other people's culture, which I've had the luxury of doing.
Right.
And I'll probably continue to do that to some degree, although I'm glad I did most of my traveling when I was young, because traveling is hard now.
Yeah.
Just going to the airport and getting on the damn plane and putting up with the foolishness there. And, and I don't know the status of the United States as it is now in the world. I don't think American citizens are welcomed in too many places. I mean, where would I go where I would feel...
Well, Americans are moving to other European countries now, but I don't know how much the native citizens there at the countries really want us there.
Well, I pulled out 2 magazines because I was talking to my girlfriend Lynette, who lives in England. We're talking about relocating or getting invested in Portugal. And there's 3 countries right now that are offering what they call golden visas, where you can take a class, learn how to get in on this golden visa, where you get a visa for Portugal, which allows you to travel anywhere in the European Union without any other kind of, and it's so easy. Slowly, the European countries are taking that away, but it's still there in Portugal, Greece, Malta, and maybe Spain. And once you get that visa, I mean, you're a citizen there.
You don't give up your...
No. Yeah. You don't have to give up your American citizenship.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wind down, but I want to ask you a question, which is about life lessons. I have a cousin, Rita, who's 90, and when I go visit her, she will just give me like these pieces of wisdom that are like so simple. Really, her wisdom about life is don't take things too seriously. Really don't take things too seriously.
Right. This too will pass.
Yeah, exactly. And so do you have anything about life that you've come to a realization about as you reflect on some of your experiences? Is there any lesson or?
I don't have any serious regrets about anything. I've pretty much followed my heart, although I can be impulsive at times. But my impulses pretty much are right on.
Yeah.
I think that my tendency to love others and to serve.
Yeah.
And my sense of independence makes it easier for me to just be at home wherever you are. You make yourself at home wherever you happen to be. And enjoy the moment,
Yeah.
I think.
So you try to be present.
Yeah. It's not always easy to do that because I'm kind of obsessive compulsive sometimes,
I know.
How do you know that? I've hidden that.
You have not. Well, thank you, Cindy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I really
mean,
appreciate this.
You made me cry and everything.
I
Maybe
know.
I needed to cry.
Gosh, I don't know. We're gonna have to dig a little
But
deeper
it
with
doesn't
that.
mean I'm sad.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It just means I'm touched somehow.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all of our episodes on traditional podcast platforms. Please subscribe to the podcast, like the episode, and share Let's Start Healing with at least one person. Until next time, let's start healing.